So, what a nice conversation to have with so many young people about finding a marriage mate. So someone asked me if this was specifically designed for this congregation, and the answer is yes. It's part of a program, a few of them that we had at home, but decided that, well, with 43 regular pioneers, they can't all be married, so there must be lots of single people. So, one thing though, before I start, is that this article, these questions just don't apply to young ones. Because I know some that are in their 40s, their 50s, 60s, 70s. I know a brother that's 82 that if the right sister came along. So it's for young and old, this article this evening. So let's start off. Feel free to comment. Okay, let's have lots of nice participation and we'll see if we can get the spirit of what the articles are telling us. So first of all, how old should a person be before considering marriage? So what do you think? Look at that, not a single hand up. All the married ones, eh? Brother in the front here, young, single brother. Brother Andre, we'll get him on another question, like the kissing one.
There is no age limit, but they should be ready spiritually and mentally to make such decision.
Good. There's no age limit, eh? Okay, Brother Stevens? Let's have some more on this.
And what the article showed was that some time would have to pass. For instance, they would have to begin showing parts or showing the fruitages of the Spirit, so there would be a time period that would pass.
Okay, and Brother Tony, here. I hope you don't mind. I've worked hard on getting some of your first names.
The article also did mention that the maturity that is needed is the kind that will be necessary for those who are entering the marriage arrangement, and cultivating the fruitages of the Spirit will help in this way.
Okay, so what's the expression that we used to always go by? A person shouldn't get married until... Okay, let's have Sister Rochelle.
We used to say past the bloom of youth.
Until they're past the bloom of youth. But this article doesn't take it from that angle. Because a person can be 40 years old, past the bloom of youth, and yet not mature, and should probably not get married. There's some immature 40-year-olds. Okay? So what does this article say again? What's the key then, Sister Georgina? What's the key, Georgina?
Well, it brought out that marriage was not an experimental arrangement that could be dropped if you found difficulty or whatever, but it brought out that with maturity, with age and so forth, you would have to honestly examine yourself, your likes, your dislikes, your appreciation, your understanding, and with all this coupled together, then you would be more in a position to know yourself, know what you want, and know what you would perhaps expect of somebody else.
Okay, and let's have Brother Chris Sapunik. I'm looking for a scripture. But you give me your comment anyway.
Okay.
That's okay, Chris.
The key is to at least let enough time to go by, it could be a short time or a long time, that experience has molded you so that you can display those qualities that are needed for a successful
marriage. What qualities, Chris?
The qualities that the fruit of the Spirit.
That's it, you see. That's the key right there. Galatians 5, that's what it says, 22 and 23. That a person should, and how long should they, in that process, to do with the fruitages of the Spirit? What does it say, Sister Lorena?
It mentions that these qualities should be cultivated before they contemplate marriage, not after they're married.
Right. So you see, this article deals with the spiritual man and the spiritual woman. So age does not become a factor. It's a person, if they have cultivated, past tense, the fruitages of the Spirit, then they may be in a position to get married. Now, what did it say? Anybody get there? It did give a caution, though, about teenage marriages. 16, 17 years old. What was that little bit of a caution it gave? Sister Pam Dunnick?
I think, well, the point that I was thinking of is that really at that age, no person has experienced enough to be a successful marriage mate, but also to think about how much you've changed in the past 3 or 4 years, and even a 20-year-old to think of how their views have changed since they were 13, and consider how much they'll change in the next few years as well.
Right, so that should be a consideration. Sister Sunville?
And also I thought it was an interesting point where it says that there's no rule of law for a person wanting to get married beyond that which is set as the legal age by government. So a person should also look at that. If government says, okay, you can't get married until you're 19, so why get married before you're 19?
Right. Okay. So you see, it gives a very balanced approach, doesn't it, that article? On the one page 20 in paragraph 16, it made this caution, that's all, that thus we often find teenagers and young adults want things exclusively their own way. And in their quest for satisfying their wants, they are unconcerned that others may be hurt or suffer. So it says in the previous paragraph, 14, rushing into matrimony at a young age is fraught with many dangers. Okay? So does that mean that teenagers can't get married? Because we need to establish this. Can teenagers not get married, Brother Robert?
I've seen teenagers who have cultivated the fruitage of the Spirit and who were mature in that regard. And so yes, they could have got married in that regard if they were mature spiritual. But if they haven't cultivated those fruitages of the Spirit and they hadn't even started to learn that regard, then no, they're not.
Right. That's the answer right there. So how old should a person be before considering marriage? We've had all the comments now, so somebody put it in a nutshell. What's the answer to that question? Sister Renee.
It is until they meet the spiritual qualifications.
Until they've cultivated the fruitages of the Spirit. Right. And yet we have the cautions about teenage marriages. Okay, sisters. Let's see here. Let me get out this long list. My goodness. Girls, what should you look for in a prospective husband? So, of course, this is all the single girls that should answer this one. What should you look for in a prospective husband? Okay, sister. I'm sorry, I forget your name.
The article had many things. Some things that it mentioned is that in word and deed he stands out as a man of principle, and that looking at him you know he'll care for the family's spiritual needs by taking the lead in regular family study, in prayer, and of course the ministry. You see that he has reliance on Jehovah, and many qualities that you look for that would be good are also mentioned was compassion, forgiveness, and empathy and understanding of a woman.
Okay, what else do you look for? You single girls? Renee?
The Watchtower brought out as well that we could look for someone who's understanding and kind, and as well has a desire to serve Jehovah God and to do His will.
Okay, good. Let's have Jill, please.
Can admit his mistakes and say sorry. He's a good spiritual leader, good communicator.
That's right. That's an important one, Jill. A brother that can truly say he's sorry. And not that type of sorry that is not sincere. Like when he makes a mistake and he says, oh yeah, sorry. You know, like, that's not sincere. Okay? But a man that can truly say he's sorry to a woman, then you may have a good man on your hands. Okay? That's one of the things it mentioned in that article. Something else, sister, up here? All the brothers will be practicing saying I'm sorry now.
he must also be able to take consideration of the interests of others, not only his own, and also he must also contemplate whether or not his wife's friends or his girlfriend's friends, or also if his friends, he should also take into consideration their interest and so forth, not his own. He should not be selfish.
Good, yeah. Jessica? Is that your name? Okay, Jessica. What are you going to look for, Jessica?
Generosity.
What was that? Can you say that again?
Generosity.
Generosity, that's right. A brother that gives you lots of things. That's good, Jessica. Okay. Sister Theodora, Sister Russell's wife. I can't say that last name, sorry.
And Jesus, of course, the perfect example, is mentioned here, and it makes a very good point that he was not known for his perfect body, which he very well probably could have been, but for his loyalty to principle and to truth. So this is a very good point. If a man loves the truth, loves Jehovah, then likely he will be cultivating the fruitages of the Spirit.
Right. And the girls are all thinking a good body helps too. I see all these single girls smiling here. Kathy, Sister Kathy, what else?
The paragraph also mentions he should be a man of God, a brother who has already cultivated qualities such as justice, mercy, love, and kindness.
Good. Those are the four that I really wanted to be brought out. The man has already cultivated love, justice, those qualities, you see. It's not a brother who is just new or a brother who is immature, who has not been cultivating, but it's cultivated. It's all past tense. Now, in one of the paragraphs, it gave some other. In paragraph 7, what about a brother who is one who gets in debt? Do you think that, see paragraph 7 on page 23 of that one article, would a man who gets himself in debt when he's single perhaps be a good prospect? What might happen? Brother Robert?
No, it wouldn't, because one difficulty with marriages today is financial problems. If he's got a problem with it before he gets into marriage, you're going to have a problem when you're in marriage.
Yeah.
So you're looking after two people, not one.
Right. How would you girls know if a brother that was interested in you was a brother who was in debt? If you're buying, right? If you go for supper and he, it may be an awkward question to ask, but it is mentioned here in paragraph 7 that because it says a man who does not accumulate burdensome debts, knowing that this can lead to trying problems. So if he's a man that accumulates burdensome debts when he's single, you may have a marriage that is fraught with much frustration. Brother Sunville?
Perhaps in the conversation, he would slip out an expression like, oh, I forgot to pay the visa payment. That indicates that he is just paying the minimum every month rather than the whole bill.
Good. Yeah, Sister Sunville?
Or if a brother is taking his sister out and always pays with plastic, so maybe then you might start thinking.
That's right, yeah. Brother Russell, please.
And also, if a single brother perhaps might be living beyond his means, and it's perhaps known why this would indicate that he's really not counting the cost, following the principle of Jesus, who does not first of all count the cost before he builds the tower. So it's really applying the truth really within his own single life, showing some self-denial when he may not be able to afford something at the present time.
Good. Here's another warning for you sisters to be on guard with. Page 22 in that November 1st 85 Watchtower said this, that a man of God has conscience, good heart, and proper motive. He will not do things that violate his conscience, ignoring righteous principles. He will not allow his good motives to be undermined by unclean conduct and actions. Okay? So it may even be a young man invites you to go to a show. Well, you could tell by the type of show you're invited to whether or not he might be a good prospective husband by the very entertainment that he chooses. So you see, sisters, you really have a good guide here, many things to look for in a brother that you would like to contemplate marrying. Okay, now, boys, what should you look for in a prospective wife? What do you brothers look for? Look at it. Oh, Brother Andretti is volunteering. Brother Andretti, what should a brother look for?
A woman who's God-fearing and is stable, knows what she wants.
That's right. That's what the article said. Eh? What other things, brothers, do you look for? Brother Andrew, what is in Lorena that you looked for?
Well, let me get out my list. just kidding.
Oh, that ought to be good for some brownie points.
A woman who is submissive, and usually you can tell by the way they act towards the other brothers and the way they treat others in the congregation.
Good. Very good, yeah. What other thing, brothers? Young Joda, please. What do you look for?
Sincere is pretty important because nobody, guy or girl, likes someone who's phony.
That's right. Yeah, not someone who's put on, eh? Brother Chris, you had your hand up too? Did you want to add something?
She would be discerning, understanding. Her husband should be able to count on her for good and just observations, sound opinions, and sincere encouragement.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yes. Brother Yard?
Proverbs 31 and 30, 31 and 30 really covers the nicely when it says, "The charm may be false, and prettiness may be vain, but the woman that fears Jehovah is the one that procures praise for himself."
Good, right. And Brother Warren Dunnick?
And 1 Peter 3 has a nice definition of what's attractive to Jehovah in a woman, and that's the quiet and mild spirit.
Good. Yeah. Brother Alan Stevens?
Another quality that would be important would be being loyal to the truth. She has submission under an imperfect individual in a close relationship, so that's very important.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Brother Blaine?
Someone who's sympathetic to the problems that others have.
Mm-hmm. Brother Tony?
Similar thoughts, someone who takes an interest in the congregation, in helping others who have certain needs in the congregation.
Good. Brother Reuben up front here, and then Brother Rob Bird right there.
Paragraph 13 on page 24 puts it this way: she is among the first to want to help, taking a genuine interest in the needs of others. So not waiting until everyone else has started helping, but taking the initiative.
That's right. Robert?
Yeah, just thinking the same line in that regard. She's generous. That with her time, with her efforts, being able to work with others no matter what.
Right. Did you notice something that she is not? Something she's not, Brother Chris? It said it in the paragraph there.
One expression was that she is not worldly wise.
Yeah, you see, our sisters are so different from women in the world. Women in the world, well, you know what they're like, right? But our sisters are different. They're different even to look at them. They're different in their conduct. They're different in their speech. Women in the world can be tough and can have that worldly wisdom to them. And it says that this isn't a quality that is something to look for in a Christian sister, being worldly wise. Okay? Let's have something else. Brother Alan? Is that Alan?
So the whole thing boils down to is that the sister must also cultivate the fruitages of the Spirit as well.
That's right. She has to be a spiritual woman, eh? Okay, so that's just a few things what to look for. Now, one problem that many young people have And if you cannot find a suitable mate here in the university congregation, then what do you do? What do you do? Okay, let's have Sister Pam.
There was a good suggestion that we could, at the Circuit and District Assembly, get to know others that are living nearabouts us, and also if we volunteer, then we'll get to know many brothers and sisters, and we might even eventually find a mate in that situation.
Right. Why is volunteering? Now, she mentioned volunteering. Why is volunteering so important? Brother Blaine? Why is that important to look there?
People that have volunteered are usually ones that have cultivated the fruits of the Spirit already, so you're already looking at the right kinds of people.
Right. Because those that aren't volunteering, have you ever noticed how they act and how you can identify somebody? I got a kick out of it at our last circuit assembly. Eileen and I, we sat at the back. And you know the brothers that during the program, they get up, and as they get up and they're walking up the aisle, they go, all the way up the aisle. Have you seen brothers like that? Yeah. So they haven't cultivated at this time those fruitages of the Spirit, eh? And then at the assemblies we find the sisters. There's lots of expressions for them, but I heard corridor cuties this week. But I think sometimes they look so nice, they kind of look like wallflowers, you know? But what kind of sisters attract what kind of brothers at the assembly? You see, it's those brothers that attract those sisters, right? Right, Tammy? So we are encouraged to go to the volunteer, because what will we see there? They have some qualities there. Brother Sunville, what do we see in the young people in volunteering?
Well, normally we would see that they have to some degree already developed some spiritual qualifications.
Right? And brother, let's have Sister Shauna.
These ones also show that they're industrious and that they're willing to put themselves out for others.
Right, because they're there to serve others. Right? So if they serve others at an assembly, then what are they likely to be like in a marriage? Brother Russell?
Well, it shows that they're really not selfish. They're interested in helping. So naturally that would carry over to their mate in the way they deal with their mate.
Right. So you sisters, if you see a young, a brother that you look like you might be interested in, you go into that department. You see the brother that oversees it. I'd like to volunteer. Because it's a good sign that if a brother is already there volunteering, that's what the article says. It says go to the circuit and district assemblies and look at those volunteering, right? Because they're self-sacrificing already, and they're likely going to make a good husband or a good wife for you. Brother Sunva.
Also, those that are in volunteer service, they are not like the flower on the wall, because the flower on the wall would get damaged in the volunteer service. So these sisters are more the type that they want to serve, and they are spiritual, more spiritual than those that don't volunteer. Just look at their own picture in the mirror all the time.
That's right, yeah. Because you know where the other ones hang out, right? The brothers like this and the girls like this, they hang out close to the washroom so that they can keep going back in to have a little bit of a look to make sure they're okay, right? But the brothers and sisters that are volunteering, they don't care what they look like, right? They're working hard, their hair's all messy, right? But that's a true spiritual person. So that's where you go to look, in the volunteer section. Andrew? Brother Andrew?
I was just thinking too, also when you volunteer, you meet more people than when you just walk around.
Yeah, it's a great way. It really is, to get to know people. Now, that was the second one. What really was the first thing that we were encouraged to do? Sister, my wife, Eileen.
Prayer to Jehovah about the matter.
Yeah, pray to Jehovah about it. Last year at Sky Dome, there was a lovely sister, a single sister had an interesting experience. And maybe it was one of you, because I don't know who the sister was. And she said, when the brother was talking to her, she said, I trust that Jehovah knows what's best for me, because he knows my personality, whether or not I should be here or be there, whether or not I should stay single or get married. And I trust in that. And I thought, what a mature comment from that young sister at the district convention. So that's really the key, that we wait on Jehovah, and it doesn't hurt to go to the assemblies. Okay, next question. All right, now, is holding hands, kissing, or embracing appropriate? And if so, when? Okay, let's have this little girl here.
Tracy.
Tracy? Okay.
Yes, when the relationship has reached a point where mutual commitment has developed and marriage seems imminent.
So you can kiss boys? When, you said it, yeah, when a mutual commitment. So holding hands, kissing, and embracing are appropriate, but there's some other key words there to help us get the time period. Sister, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. I'm trying hard to get most of your names. I apologize that I haven't.
Well, I'm not sure about the time frame, but it's not something that happens at the beginning of a relationship, obviously, because there should be genuine expressions of endearment, not passion, which can be selfish if one person is not ready for a commitment. There should be expressions of endearment, not passion.
Okay, so when can those, let's have Karen, please, Karen.
So it's when there's a mutual commitment, a commitment has been made by both of them, and also when marriage seems imminent.
When marriage seems imminent, you can hold hands, kiss, and embrace. Now what is imminent? What is imminent? Brother Warren?
It's just around the corner.
That's right. Brother Sunville?
Perhaps when the Kingdom Hall has been booked for the wedding.
Yeah. A storm, when a weatherman says a storm is imminent, how many days is he giving you advance warning? Generally. How many days advance warning? Robert? It's right at the back there, brother.
Usually only 1 or 2 days earlier.
Yeah, that's it. It means near, that it's very near. So that's what the article says here, doesn't it? It says expressions of endearment should be made only when the relationship has reached a point where mutual commitment has developed and marriage seems imminent. Okay? So as to how soon, we can't say how many days or weeks or months that is, but when marriage is imminent, you can hold hands, kiss, and embrace. But now, what type of kiss? Let's talk about the kiss, because it does describe what can be done here. Did any of you get it? Got you stumped. Georgina, what kind of kiss can you give?
Well, obviously, expressions of affection are meant just as that, not something that's going to arouse you to perhaps sexual immorality or anything like that. Where passion arousing kissing is involved, you know you've gone too far. Maybe in the beginning it would just be like a little expression, I love you or whatever, we're going to get married soon. The passion bit comes later, way later.
But how do you know? Now it says here, when done as general expressions of endearment, not selfish passion. How do you girls know if a brother's kissing you with selfish passion? Well, let me help you out. You see, it says that kissing can be done when there are genuine expressions of endearment and not selfish passion. So I'll illustrate it this way. I don't kiss my mother-in-law the way I kiss my wife. What do you give mother-in-laws? You know, you give them those little, right? Or what do you give your father-in-law? Oh, hi, Dad. Right? You give him a little peck on the cheek, because that's what? It's a genuine expression of endearment. Oh, nice to see you, mother-in-law. Haven't seen you for so long. Oh, give me a hug, she says. And you give her a little peck on the cheek, right? That's a genuine expression of endearment. Now, what type of kiss can be given when marriage is imminent? It says, genuine expressions of endearment. That's the kind. So, a couple that's going to get married in 2 weeks, if there was any, I don't know if there is here, can give a genuine expression of endearment kiss. That's the kind, not a selfish passion kiss. So think of your mother-in-law or think of your father-in-law when you kiss your prospective mate. Pretend you're going to be kissing your mother-in-law. And then that will help you not to have a selfish, arousing passion kiss. Okay, let's go on. How important is the pursuit of marriage in a Christian's life? Got to get rolling on here. How important is it? Is the pursuit of marriage in your life? Okay, let's have sister up front here, please.
Oh, this was interesting. The article used the scripture in 1 Corinthians 7:29, that time left is reduced. So the pursuit of marriage would take secondary place. It wouldn't fill our whole lives, but bear in mind our service to Jehovah coming first.
Okay, so does that mean we shouldn't get married? Is that what the article says, Shauna? Sister Shauna?
No, Paul said that getting married wasn't a sin and staying single wasn't a sin. But what it made an interesting comment in the article. It said that even married Christians should not devote themselves so completely to marriage privileges and duties that these are their whole life. So regardless if we're married or single, the kingdom has to be first.
Right. So paragraph 4 said, rather they should keep kingdom interests first in life. So if you can keep kingdom interests first and pursue kingdom interests and still get married, then go ahead and get married. If you can keep kingdom interests first. But if it's going to interfere with your spirituality and with seeking kingdom interests, then it's best not to get married. And that's what the article's saying. So it's not saying yes or no. It's saying that it shouldn't hinder your spirituality. Okay, let's go on to the last question here. Now, how important is it to marry only in the Lord? And what danger exists, even if a mate does come into the truth later on? So how important is it to marry only in the Lord? Yes, Judah, please. Brother Judah? Jodah! Sorry.
I live with Judah. It's very important because the most important thing is our relationship with Jehovah, and the article mentioned that a partner who was in the truth and a servant of Jehovah would help us with continued fidelity to Jehovah. And even if that person came in the truth, marrying them in the first place was a manifestation of an independent spirit and could lead to perhaps something down the road that you wouldn't be able to bounce back from quite like that.
Right, so even if they're successful getting their mate into the truth, Sister Jill? No. Yeah, Jill. No? No, that's the one in front. I'm sorry.
No, because they still disobeyed Jehovah, so it's that independent attitude. And I remember one example one time of, it was not too long ago in one of the watchtowers where a sister did that. She married out of the truth, but her mate eventually came into the truth, and her comments were, though, that she couldn't express how awful the feelings she had when young ones would point to her and say, but it worked out for her, because she would feel guilty and always be reminded of that.
That's right. So it's still disobedience, isn't it? So that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, so thanks for your participation there. I've taken it a little over time, so I need to get cracking here. So that fact that it is still disobedience when we marry somebody out of the truth. So the theme of this next part is going to be obedience to direction means life. And wouldn't you, brothers and sisters, agree that really there's been no area in life that the faithful slave hasn't provided us with some direction or some guidance. They've given us a guidance on what our goals should be for young people, for married people, for everybody. We've had guidance the last few weeks about what type of music and entertainment we should listen to. We've had guidance about whether or not we should get married, like we've had in these articles this evening. We've had direction and guidance as to whether or not we should pioneer in life. So there's really no area that the faithful slave has not touched on. But it's unfortunate that some in the congregation continue to do their own thing, regardless of the direction that the faithful and discreet slave provides for us. Well, in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 14, when he talked about obedience there, could you just take a look at that? 1 Peter 1 and verse 14. Because we talked about the other verses the other night, but Peter helps us to appreciate what our obedience is like. In verse 14, he says, "As obedient children, quit being fashioned according to the desires you formerly had in your ignorance." So when he says as obedient children, he says to be like children. And what are children like? A few weeks ago in our book study, we had that children are humble. Children are teachable. But yet those of us as adults, we need to be humble and teachable. We need to learn to perceive the direction that the faithful slave is directing us to go in all these areas of life. Because following direction from the slave class is a sign of obedience. So for example, we talked about this last question, marrying out of the truth. We've had direction from the Lord's organization and from the Bible itself not to do it. And yet, Sister just gave an experience of a sister who did it. And some still do it. But the article said it's disobedience. Well, we may seem to get away with things now. But it doesn't mean that it's right, does it? And it's like that article said. It's still disobedience. So I'm just using that as an example, marrying out of the truth. Because we may be successful getting a mate here and in the truth, but it was still wrong, wasn't it? So I'd like to show you a biblical example just to show you the importance and the caution that we should have to be obedient to all the direction that we receive, regardless if we may seem to get away with things now. So if you'll go into your Bibles to 2 Samuel, chapter 16, you might remember this in our Bible highlights. We had this a few weeks or a month ago. In 2 Samuel chapter 16, we're going to discuss a story of an individual who got away with something. He was able to be disobedient and got away with it. Now in 2 Samuel 16, we'll look in verse 5 and pick up the story. So follow along, please. It says, "And King David came as far as Behiram, and look, coming out from there was a man of the family of Saul's house, and his name was Shimei, the son of Gera. Coming out and calling down evil as he came out, he began throwing stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were at his right and at his left. And this is what Shimei said as he called down evil. 'Get out! Get out, you blood-guilty man, you good-for-nothing man. Well, Jehovah has brought back upon you all the blood guilt for the house of Saul, in place of whom you've ruled as king. And Jehovah gives the kingship into the hand of Absalom your son. And here you are in your calamity, because you're a blood-guilty man.' So verse 9 says, finally, Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, he said to the king, that is to David, 'Well, why should this dead dog call down evil upon my lord the king? Let me go over, please, and I'll take his head off.' Well, why did Abishai say that? Because Shimei was disobedient. He did something that was deserving of death. He called down evil on the anointed of Jehovah. And Abishai knew it. Said, hey, he's being disobedient. He should be punished for this. I'll go kill him. Because that was the penalty for calling down evil on one of the Lord's anointed. So let's see what happens. Go into chapter 19, because this chapter continues by saying David doesn't allow that to happen. Now into chapter 19, we see in verse 16, we're talking about Shimei again. And now down to verse 19. Now Shimei realizes that he was disobedient. So verse 19 says, he now said to the king, this is Shimei talking to David, do not let my Lord attribute error to me. Do not remember the wrong that your servant did on the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, so that the king should lay it to his heart. For your servant well knows that I'm the one that sinned. And so here I have today come the first of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. So you see, Shimei comes to David and says, hey, you let me off the hook. I was disobedient. Look, I'm sorry. So what happens? Verse 21, here's Abishai again. At once Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, he answered and he said, in return for this, should not Shimei be put to death? And that he called down evil upon the anointed of Jehovah. You see, Abishai, he was a man of God. He knew this man was disobedient. He's supposed to die. Well, what's David say? In verse 22, but David said, oh, what do I have to do with you men, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should become today a resistor of me? Will anyone today be put to death in Israel? For do I not well know that today I am king over Israel? Then the king said to Shimei, you will not die. And the king went on to swear to him. So Shimei was able to get away with a disobedient act that could have meant his life. He deserved the death sentence for what he did. Abishai knew it. David knew it. But David said, asked an interesting question, will anyone today be put to death in Israel? So the Insight volume goes on to explain why David asked that question. It was because the time period that David lived in, it represented a time of warfare. It was not the time for meting out justice for all of the penalties against the law and for all of the infractions of disobedience. So yes, Shimei should have been put to death because he was disobedient, but it wasn't the time, because it was a time of warfare. Well, the Insight book goes on to say that the time period of King David, it represents the warfare that Christ Jesus is in, from 1914 to Armageddon. And we are living in a time period where it is not time for the Lord to be dealing out justice for all the infractions of disobedience. So there are some things that we may seem to get away with now, because humans cannot impose any sort of penalty. So as an example, marrying out of the truth is one of them. So a person can't be disfellowshipped for marrying an unbeliever. But it is still a Bible law, a Bible command that is broken. So it's an act of disobedience. So what do we learn from that account though? Shimei realized his mistake and he said, hey, I'm sorry. I know I did wrong. So there may be someone in the audience this evening. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to weigh you down with guilt. But it is true. You can approach Jehovah God and beg forgiveness for doing an act of disobedience, like marrying out of the truth, for example. Because Shimei was, and he was pardoned. But now what happened as time went on? It's interesting as we go in now to 1 Kings chapter 2. 1 Kings chapter 2. So although Shimei wasn't put to death, because it wasn't the time for doing that, just like this time period we are living in isn't the time for dealing out justice in all these areas. But in 1 Kings chapter 2, let's read verse 1. It says, and the days of David gradually drew near for him to die, And he proceeded to command Solomon his son, saying, all right, so you get the setting. Now go to verse 8. He says, and here there is with you Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite from Behurim. And he it was that called down evil upon me with a painful malediction on the day that I was going to Mahanaim. And he it was that came down to meet me at the Jordan, so that I swore to him by Jehovah, saying, I shall not put you to death by the sword. But look what he tells his boy Solomon to do. And now, do not leave him unpunished. For you're a wise man. You well know what you ought to do to him. And you must bring his gray hairs down to Sheol with blood. Wow. Pretty strong, isn't it? You see, Solomon was a righteous man as well. David said, you well know what I should have did. He should have been put to death, but I didn't. So now he warns Solomon about him. So what takes place? Look in chapter 2 in verse 36. Let's see what happens. In verse 36, it says, finally the king sent, and he called Shimei, and he said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem. You must dwell there and not go out from there to this place and that. And it must occur that on the day of your going out, and when you do pass over the torrent valley of Kidron, you should unmistakably know that you will positively die. Blood guilt for you will itself come to be upon your own head. At this Shimei said to the king, oh, the word's good. Just as my lord the king has spoken is the way that your servant will do. And Shimei kept dwelling in Jerusalem many days. So Shimei was given a pardon for his act of disobedience that was done previously. But Solomon put some restrictions on him now and said, look, you can go live out the days of your life in Jerusalem, but don't leave. Okay? Shimei said, okay, thanks. He realizes that he was pardoned. So it goes on to say, though, in verse 39, it says, and it came about at the end of 3 years, the 2 slaves of Shimei went running away to Achish. You yourself certainly know all the injury. You see, he brings it up, what happened years previously. Verse 44, you yourself certainly know all the injury which your heart well knows that you did to David my father. And Jehovah will certainly return the injury by you upon your own head. But King Solomon will be blessed, and the throne of David itself will prove to be firmly established before Jehovah forever. Well, with that, the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, who then went out and fell upon him so that he died. And the kingdom was firmly established in the hand of Solomon. Well, the Insight volume also says, friends, that the peaceful reign of King Solomon represents the 1,000-year reign of the Lord Jesus Christ. And during that time, when Solomon reigned, Shimei was forgiven. He was allowed to live in that peaceful reign in Israel under those beautiful conditions. But what happened? What happened after 3.5 years that he ran out of Jerusalem to go get his slaves? Well, I just want to bring this article that we discussed the last question. It says, nevertheless, the brother who married an unbaptized person was disobedient. Will that independent spirit surface once again? Might he be tempted to think he knows better than God and thus disregard Bible counsel and trust in his own wisdom in yet another situation? Well, you see, that's what happened to Shimei, because he was a disobedient person. So how does that leave brothers and sisters who have married out of the truth? Well, certainly it's not to scare you, and don't get the wrong impression about that, but it helps us to appreciate that we need to weed out of our heart any seeds of disobedience that we might have. Because it could be that we make it even into the new world, like Shimei did back then, and yet he made, how many mistakes was he allowed to make? Just one. And something from the old world, under the time of warfare that he lived, it surfaced again in the new world. So you see, brothers and sisters, when we go into the new world, we are not going to be automatically brand new hearts. We're going to take our hearts from this old world into that new world. That's why it's so important to be obedient now to all the direction we get from the faithful slave. Because all that is not going to be present in God's new world is the influence of Satan. But our hearts were taken with us. And if we sown in our hearts seeds of disobedience, that'll go with us too. So there's encouragement. Jehovah can forgive all of us for any act of disobedience that we've had, but we must work hard to cultivate a pure heart in Jehovah's eyes. Not be tempted to be disobedient with any direction that we receive from the Lord's organization. It was interesting, back in February, I'd like to read you this comment from the faithful slave. February 1st, 93 Watchtower. They said, "To keep a good conscience, we must be obedient to the unenforceable. That is, to laws or principles that humans cannot enforce." So, marrying out of the truth, the elders can't enforce that. You can't be disfellowshipped for it. Coming to meetings is a biblical command that was given under direction of God's Holy Spirit. You can't be punished if you don't want to come. But it says here, we should be obedient to the unenforceable. It says we must live by Bible principles. We must do what we know is right. Keep from doing what we know is wrong, whether others notice it or not. It says this is so, even though we might be able to get away with either doing what we should do or doing what we should not. Well, do you know why the Lord's organization wrote that back in February? Because they realize that if we're disobedient now, that we're growing in our heart these seeds of disobedience. And just making it into the new world is no guarantee that we're going to be faithful in that new world, because it may surface like Shimei. So friends, always learn to get the spirit of what God's organization is telling you. So like we talked about marriage here tonight, and sure, we can kid a little bit about marriage, but the spirit of what the Lord's organization said is for your benefit, you single people. When they said about kissing, right? That it shouldn't be selfish, passion-arousing, but genuine expressions of endearment. Well, there's a reason why they say that. So be obedient to the direction that God's organization gives us. Because obedience to direction, as I mentioned, is going to mean our life. So in Hebrews chapter 5, here's what's necessary for each of us in this matter of being obedient. Hebrews 5 and verse 14. Now, you brothers and sisters here, I know you're mature, because I've been with you this week. You're a good, active group of brothers and sisters. But here's what's necessary for all of us. Hebrews 5 verse 14. It says, "But solid food belongs to mature people, to those who through use have their perceptive powers trained to distinguish both right and wrong." So the key for us, friends, is to learn how to develop perception. Now, perception helps us to get the spirit of what the Lord's saying through his organization. So you're not going to find rules. And we had an article that said that. There's no rules on things. There's no cut and dried, no, you can't marry if you're 16, you can if you're 20. We don't find those kind of rules. But we learn to get the spirit behind what they're telling us. We learn not to look for the little loopholes. Yeah, but it doesn't say this, or it does say this. You see, we don't learn to become that kind of a person. But we get the overall spirit. Now, what's the Lord's organization telling me? They're telling me to go to meetings because it's beneficial. They're telling me this, they're telling me that. So friends, that's the key. Because when we learn to develop perception, much like a connoisseur of wine, somebody that's proficient as a connoisseur of wine, they spend much time learning about wine, right? So they might get a bottle of wine out, put it in a glass, and they swish it around. They watch the rings fall on the inside of the glass because they're trying to judge whether or not it's a good wine. So they watch the rings, they smell the wine to get the bouquet of the wine to see if it's a good smelling wine, and then they taste it. What do? Gulp it down? No. They take a little sipping. Just get it on their tongue. Why? Because they're developed perception. They know how to taste a good wine. And they go through a process of perception, learning to perceive what a good wine is. And yet, on the contrast, we got winos. Right? Winos don't care if the rings flow down the glass. They don't care about the smell. They don't go, but they go, right? So that's the difference. So what do you want to be? You want to be a spiritual connoisseur of the Bible. One who learns to dig into the Bible. One who learns to perceive what God's organization wants you to do, what direction it wants you to go. Not like a spiritual wino, right? But a spiritual connoisseur of the Bible. So you friends have been doing a very, very fine job. I'm so happy. It's been a real privilege for us to come to visit you here. I just would like to share with you some of your activity. You're just a model congregation. 43 regular pioneers. 20 of you auxiliary pioneered in the last 6 months. Very commendable. You have a total of 107 publishers, in case you're wondering. And you publishers have really been setting a good example. 16.5 hours you're averaging, and you certainly are higher than many, many congregations. So it's very commendable, the effort that you're putting into the good news in this area. And your meeting attendance, it could improve marginally, but I realize there's sickness and things like that. But you're really doing a fine job. So it seems like you, brothers and sisters, do have perception, because you're being obedient to the Lord's direction in these last days. And the activity in this congregation demonstrates that. So I have nothing but good to say to the society about our visit here. It's been truly wonderful to be with you, dear friends. But could I make, if you didn't mind, just one observation? And it may or may not be applicable, just something that I observed and had read an article and just wanted to caution you on. Okay? Because we have so many pioneers here, and there's a lot of you single pioneers, a lot of single brothers, ministerial servants. A lot of you are pioneering and single. I'd just like to caution you on one thing that may be happening, is pairing off a single brother and a single sister, or even a married person with another person, and pairing off in twos to spend your day in the service, because I heard that it happens here. So you make previous arrangements. So maybe two single people phone and say, do you want to work together? I got calls to do. And you go and you spend the day in the service together. Well, it's okay. And I understand there hasn't been a problem here with that. But I'd just like you to get the spirit of a paragraph in a recent Watchtower. Okay? So can I just read this? It says that in developed countries, so that's us, in Toronto here, some have fallen into Satan's trap by often being with a member of the opposite sex and without a third person present. And then it gives us an example, such as regularly being in the confined intimacy of a car for driving lessons. Well, that's just an example. It says, elders doing shepherding calls, of course, need to exercise caution not to be alone with a sister when counseling her. Now, the article then goes on to say what the danger is when two people of the opposite sex are together alone. It says, conversations can become emotionally charged and result in an embarrassing situation for both parties. So the footnote said, though, obviously, there would be proper occasions when a brother would provide transport for a sister, and such situations should not be misconstrued. So the article gives a very balanced view on this about people being of the opposite sex together. But were you able to perceive the spirit of what the Lord's organization was telling us? If we can avoid it, we should avoid it. Because even conversations, it says, could become emotionally charged and result in an embarrassing situation for both parties. So I'm going to tell you a situation that happened to a dear friend of ours, a pioneer sister, that a brother said something to her that he shouldn't have said, that was quite explicit sexually. And it was just the two of them. So it wasn't a proper thing to say, but she has to live with that now, that dear sister. And it was just between her and another brother, and between God. So, of course, I realize nothing's happened here, and the only thing is I just didn't want to see it happen. So don't wreck what you got, okay? So try to work in groups of 3 or 4. Try to avoid this, calling up a single brother or calling up a single girl and pairing off and spending the day. I know it's difficult here with transportation, the way you do service here, so please, I'm not making a rule on this either. I just wanted you to get the spirit of what this said. Okay? So the faithful slave knows, because the next paragraph, they said, the aforementioned circumstance about conversations, it says they've led some Christians to lower their guard and commit immoral acts. So in investigating how immoral acts result, it seems to stand back to, it started with a conversation. So it's only going to take, and incidentally, who's it talking about? Not people in the world. It's talking about us in the congregation. It's only going to take one person to wreck it for you. So I'm not trying to instill some sort of a fear into you. Just be very concerned. Be cautious about it. So some sisters said, but I have calls that I want to take brothers on. Well, that's understandable. Well, if you could get a third person or a fourth person to go along with you, but if that's not convenient, then really, should it be necessary even for a sister to have to go back to call on a man? You can get a man on your initial visit, and if he seems truly interested, why not say, now, I'd be happy to arrange for one of my brothers to call back on you. And if the person is interested and is sincere, you can pass it on to one of the brothers, and he can go. If the person says, oh, no, then you know he only wanted you to come, right? There's no sincerity there. So it's the same for the brothers. Should there really be a necessity, when you really have so much interest here, should there be a necessity for you brothers to be cultivating women? Well, no, you have lots of pioneer sisters here and pioneer women publishers. So on your very first call, if you find interest, now I'm going to bring back, or I'm going to have one of the sisters from my congregation come and call on you. Okay? And they'll respect that in the territory too. So that's just a suggestion. You may have, I don't know, try to work something out. That's all. And just be cautious about it. I just would hate to hear anything happen to you. Okay? You're doing so well. And it just caught my eye first thing Wednesday morning, that's all. So try to be cautious about it, because the devil, that's what he wants to do. Some way corrupt the activity in your congregation because you're doing so well. So could you please consider that in the spirit that I'm trying to give it to you. Not to make any rules to you, but just to try to put you on warning. It's something that we should try to avoid. Okay? So anyway, we are going to look forward to some activity tomorrow. And tomorrow morning we're going to meet here at the Kingdom Hall at 9 o'clock for a service. So everybody will meet here tomorrow. But I have to admit something. I can't come. And contrary to what I've heard, I'm not going to a wedding tomorrow. Okay? Some had thought that I was going to a wedding. I'm not. I have responsibilities with the district convention at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So there's going to be a key brother that's going to fill in for me tomorrow. So I'd like you to give him lots of support. And so everybody come out tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And then on Sunday, could the elders please come at 9:15? I'd like to meet with you downstairs at 9:15. And then the meeting's at 10 o'clock, all about young people. And it's really going to tie into our article tonight. And then the talk after that is all about old people, okay? being old through my eyes, like through a young person's eyes. So I got young and old on Sunday. And then Sunday, after the meeting, at about maybe 10 or 15 minutes after the meeting, we'll have a service arrangement, okay? And then we'll go out for service. If you want to go for your lunch then, or then eat your lunch, that's good. But we'll do it about 10 or 15 minutes after the meeting. We'll come up, have an arrangement, and then we're off for the day, okay? So that's it. So take it with the spirit that it's given. Learn to perceive what the Lord's organization is telling us. So let's stand now, and since we're all dedicated to God, why not sing a lovely song, number 13, about our Christian dedication, and then I'll see you on Sunday, but the rest of you will see each other tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So let's say a prayer, and then we'll ask Brother Sunville.